All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to say the announcement again. Welcome, everyone. A special welcome to those of you joining us via video. Our Central Iowa House Church meets every Sunday morning at 10:30 to study and rightly divide the word of truth. If you believe that Christ died on the cross and forgave all sin, all of your sin, then we share your same belief. This is a faith-only. Eternal salvation is only taught in the gospel of God. Our salvation is a free gift. We didn't earn it. We can't lose it. So, my name is Heath Hill. Let's look at what we did last week and do a little review, and then we're going to get into Acts. We're going to stay in Acts 21, but let's look at Acts 21:26, where Paul was chased out of the temple and he was almost killed. Okay, until the chief captain showed up. Paul, in our next few verses, until verse 40, Paul is bound by the Roman soldiers, and he pleads to speak with the people, with the Jews. All right, let's begin with a little review, Acts 21:32, because we didn't spend a lot of time in detail on this 21:32 last session. Who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them. And when they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left beating of Paul. Where are we? And why were they beating Paul? We're in Jerusalem. Where's Jerusalem? Now let's go to the maps. If this makes sense to everybody, Europe, Africa, Israel. Okay? Got Israel there. Tiny little Israel in the big scheme of things. Let's get a little closer. Spain, Italy, Greece. You know, this is where Paul traveled, like you were mentioning before, Stephanie. We've got Israel here in the corner, surrounded by Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, all the troublemakers of this day and age. Not really troublemakers, they just differ. Zooming in even a little bit more, just on Israel itself. You've got Egypt to the side, Jordan up here, Syria, Lebanon. This is where Israel is tucked in. Now, Israel is just this lighter color, not the darker color. So that's kind of a weird shape for a nation, right? But that's who they are, and that's what they are right now. And Jerusalem is tucked in to this itty-bitty little peninsula almost, okay, into this area called the West Bank. As a review, this is where Jesus was from, this Nazareth, the Sea of Galilee, and here's where Judah was, okay, down here.
Is the West Bank a separate country from Israel?
It's a Palestinian territory, I think might be the best way. I hope
Is it considered part of Israel? Or is, like, I'm just so, like...
I would say it is not considered part of Israel from a military, from an everything else like that standpoint. From a faith standpoint, it is certainly not considered part of it. I don't know if anybody has any more knowledge than me about the technical definition of the West Bank. It is maybe a territory of the Palestinian state. I don't know how else better to put it than that.
They speak of the West Bank of Jordan.
Yeah. I think Jordan would claim it from a military, from a defense. Yep, I think.
And I suppose that's part of the controversy continually, that they're fighting for that territory or expansion thereof.
Yeah, for sure. And Jordan, of course, being a non-Jewish country. Certainly Muslim. Okay, so now let's go in from Jerusalem. Let's see what Jerusalem just itself looks like. Okay, now this is Jerusalem. This is a map of Jerusalem from 1866 that I found online from Harper and Brothers. It shows a basic outline like of a literal wall. Okay, we knew that. I mean, we know there are a lot of walls within Jerusalem themselves, but there's also a wall that kind of surrounds the main part of Jerusalem, okay? This is the basic wall that we were talking about and the 4 different quarters. So everybody gets a piece of pie. Nobody gets the whole pie. So we've got the Armenian down here, the Christian here, the Jewish here, and the Muslim here. It is very important to note that this is the Jewish part, and especially I'm gonna give you a foreshadowing that this area down here, especially this area right here, is Jewish. You're gonna know why in about 10 minutes, okay? Because this is the Temple Mount. This is the holiest of holies. This is where Solomon back in 900-esque finished the temple, that David was given the idea to make the temple, and Solomon, his boy, ended up finishing the temple, and they plunked it here on what was called the Temple Mount, supposedly. We'll get to that detail. Okay, here's another image. So we know what this whole thing is. Now let's just zoom in on this Temple Mount idea. This Temple Mount idea is what's shown up here. Now we can see all these down here, and it tells you where everything is. But this Temple Mount, so we can kind of see on the east side of all this, and up on the higher hills, you got higher hills right in here. This is actually even higher than that. But that's how Jerusalem would have looked at the time of Christ. Okay, and yeah.
You say this is modern day Jerusalem, so it is majority Muslim?
Yeah, certainly. Wow. I know. I know. I know.
Muslim, I think of Christianity and Jewish.
Yeah.
But it's like massive Muslim.
Yeah, from a population standpoint, if you add up the Christian and the Jews, and I don't know if you add the Armenians in there or not, but if you add up the Christians and the Jews, they would be 4 out of 10 of the population, and Muslim would be 6 out of the 10. Yeah, in Jerusalem. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. But a lot of it.
So is that like influx then from like the West Bank and from like other areas?
It yes and no. So what? 47, Israel actually became a state again. They became a state again in the middle of a bunch of Muslims. So it isn't really the creeping in of the Muslims, it's the fact that the Muslims were already there, and the Jews and the Christians had to reestablish themselves and centralize within the parameters of, in other words, kind of not taking land specifically, but taking occupation of those sections again. So yes, I would say that the Muslims are probably trying to flood it, but it really was already flooded because the Muslims controlled it for how many hundreds of years. The Muslim faith was made up in 643, 647, something like that. Yeah, and so what's that? Yeah, AD, yeah.
I'm just trying to like...
Totally right. So the Muslims have only been here since 600 because the Muslims have only existed since 600 or 650, 643, I can't remember exactly. But yeah, so they, and then there were some wars and some crusades and things like that got everybody thrown out, but then the Muslims recaptured it. And so the Muslims have had Jerusalem for many, many years. Up until 47, they had it for sure. Well, the English might have had it there for a little bit. Great Britain might have had it just for a little bit before that. But in 47, then they gained their own statehood. Yeah. So I know. So when you look at this, though, Muslims control this whole Temple Mount. It's going to be no wonder when you see the more maps that the Muslims control that. Okay. So right here is what we're talking about. This kind of dips down a little bit. Here's an idea that we need to understand before we look at more maps. Up on this mount, there's a temple. That's the temple of the Jews. That temple is technically the one that Herod built. It's not the one that Solomon built. Here's the one of Solomon's. Okay? If you can read this, which is blurry, but Solomon's temple was finished in 957. Was less than 1/2 the size of Herod the Great's expanded second temple of Jerusalem, which was built in around 19 BC. Okay, so all the Jews of Jesus' time, not a one of them worshipped here. They all worshiped here. Okay, in Herod's temple that he expanded and built for the Jews. All right, so it's much different. So this little guy, and I put them in this order, or I found this map intentionally. This is where the temple of Herod is sitting and in size. Keep in mind the perspective of how small this Solomon's temple would have also been. Here's a drawing. Somebody drew it, but see that guy? That's Herod's temple. Okay? Here is a big military complex. Okay? So they call the castle. Okay? Huge walls. I mean, when you think of a castle, you think of out in the Alps, but this is a castle, guys. This is several hundred feet tall. I think this is like, I can't remember how tall it is, but this is built up castle with big walls, with armaments, with a lookout tower, with a whatever. They had a lookout tower here. We'll talk about this on the next Mass, but they had a lookout tower here so then they could look and see what those Jews were doing. Keep track of them. Because this is where the whole garrison, or where that whole, there were 1,000 troops that would have been stationed here. Roman troops, okay? They had horses, they would have had all their own food, they would have had everything. And this is likely where the governor would have lived. Festus? No, I can't remember. Anyway, all right. So this is just from the side view. So we're just taking this bugger and turning it towards you. So we're going to look at it from this way. Here's the temple area. Here's Herod's Antonian. He named that after Mark Antony. And I can't remember when he died, like 40 BC or something else like that. But Herod named it after him. We're going to start to go through a couple of processes here. Temple. Romans looking after the temple, okay? Acts 21:32 is where we left off. And who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them. So that soldiers, centurions, running down. And when they saw the chief captain, the soldiers, they left the beating of Paul. So where would the centurions and the chief run down from? These steps right here. Okay? And we'll see here, again, a really blurry map because it was on something this big in a book. Tried to scan it to this. But this is where Paul stood and lectured the Jews in Acts 21. They came up with that. I didn't come up with that. But I completely agree it to be true. These steps right here in between the temple and what was the Antonia. Okay? The Roman fort, the Roman castle. Here is where the temple was. Okay, now here's the big temple, but then our small little temple, the Solomon temple, would have been, about half that size. Hopefully that picked up the audio. All right, so the big thing is steps. Now, really, for the next 4 or 5 slides, focus on these steps. Where are they in relation to everything else? Because this is going to show you how foolish, unfortunately, the Muslims have been. Or they're just trying to change history, those steps. So here's the picture. Here's the Fort Antonia. Here's the Praetorium where the governor probably would have lived. Here are those steps that they ran down in 32. Here's a current day image of what it looks like at the Dome on the Rock, or what they would call that area. This area here is where that dome sits right now. Pay attention to the structure here and the steps. Steps. Okay? They put a dome on top of a Roman fort, and they called it the holiest of holies. That ain't where the temple was. The temple sat farther than what the steps were. Over here. Almost looks like there's an outline there. Right? The true Temple Mount actually was farther over here. Was right here. This is the city, in the city of David, with the original city of David, when David came into Jerusalem 1,000 years ago. I'm sorry, I should say 1,000 years ago. 1,000 BC. The city of David was all down here. Had nothing to do with any of this. This piece of ground wasn't even in the original city of Jerusalem. Not to mention within the fort or within the whatever else like that. It's just kind of comical to me that this is actually where, because we've got the steps that come down. I mean, and they're fading, obviously, in some of these pictures. But here's a really higher end picture. Hopefully that isn't glaring for any of you. But I can see where the temple steps is. I mean, I don't have to be creative. Now, they've put on different, things on there. But that's temple steps that we're talking about, that these soldiers ran down, because we had the temple over here. They dragged Paul out of the temple. Well, where was he going to go? Where they were beating him in that. They're beating him in here, and these guys came rushing down, and okay. This whole area here was the expanded area that they don't even have their little dome thingy on. Okay. Anyway, so now we know where we're at. We kind of know what the temple looks like. Kind of know what the castle, if you will, and they call it the castle. Let's see, Acts 21:33. Then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with chains, and demanded who he was and what he had done. Who are you, and why is everybody so ticked at you? 34. And some cried one thing, some another among the multitude. And when he could not know the certainty for the tumult, he commanded him to be carried to the castle. Okay, so this multitude did have one thing in common. They were all Jews, right? We talked a couple weeks ago about multitude, and they all had to have a bond to them. Well, they were all Jews. They were Jews of Asia or Jews of Israel, but they were all Jews, but they certainly didn't agree on this one point. Okay, 35. And when he came upon the stairs, well, we know where those are now. So it was that he was born of the soldiers for the violence of the people. That born of the soldiers, that just means that they carried him. Okay, to be born of something is to be carried kind of maybe on their shoulders or picked up or dragged or whatever. But it wasn't a walking process for Paul because of the violence. Okay, verse 36. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying, "Away with him!" Now, have we heard that term, "away with him," before? Now, Jesus was triumphal entry, but he was not triumphal at Jerusalem. They were away with him. John 19:15 talks about away with him. We will free Barabbas. Okay, we don't need this Christ. They denied him. All right. Going on, Acts 21:37. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, so we're going north. We're not going south back into where the temple was. We're going into the castle, up those steps. As Paul was being led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, "May I speak unto thee?" Who said, "Can thou speak Greek?" The captain's like, "You know how to speak Greek?" So obviously the captain was Greek because, he's a Roman soldier. But he's like, "Can you speak Greek?" It is curious to me that he would have heard Paul talking before this. And Paul obviously wasn't talking in Greek. Okay? Just a note there. Can you speak Greek? He was led into the castle, wasn't he? We know where that is. Going to be led up there. 2138. And he says, can you speak Greek? And he says, art not thou that Egyptian? So the chief captain said, wait a minute, aren't you that Egyptian which before these days madest an uproar and leddest out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? So this leader, the chief captain, says, wait a minute, I think I've heard of you. You're causing another uproar, but now you're causing an uproar in the city. Aren't you that Egyptian? This is referring to, again, I didn't make a screen of it because I'm not 100% sure this is true, but I really do believe it's true. I'm making that assumption. It likely refers to an Egyptian false prophet that led a group known as the Sacari. Sicaarii. Sicaarii. They assassinated the ruling Jewish elite. They didn't assassinate the Romans, because remember, Romans controlled Jerusalem, Rome, from a military standpoint. But these Sacari, they go out assassinating these Jews, saying, you Jews, you leaders of the Jewish world, are allowing these Romans to run us, to be the boss of us. So anybody who was a Jew and a leader was a target of these Sacaris. Okay, so this Egyptian group that is talking about, and this is very historically based, that made an uproar, led out in the wilderness 4,000 men, and all you guys are a bunch of murdering thieves, all you Sacaris. Here's what they used to kill with. It's called a Sika blade. Okay, Sacari. They kill with the Sikas. Okay. 2139. But Paul said, in other words, he's saying, I'm not a Sacari. I'm not that leader guy. I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. So Paul's like, hey, before you lead me up into the castle, could you let me speak to you, Mr. Chief? And he's like, well, I don't know, do you speak Greek? And he's like, yeah, this is who I am. Paul says, I'm a dude that's from here, from Tarsus. Okay? Now we're way down here in Jerusalem, and we've got a Jew who can speak Greek, who was a Roman, but he's in Jerusalem. So of course the captain of the guard, he's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Why are you down here? Right? Why is a Roman down there? Let's see, was that 39? Yeah, speak unto the people, notice. It says in 2139. I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. He wants to speak to the people. He doesn't really want to speak to and convince the leader of the Romans. He wants to speak to the people. And when he had given him license, so the chief gave him license, and Paul stood up on the stairs. Right? We know where that is. Stood up on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying. Now, we're not going to get any farther than this, but we're going to talk a little bit about this, Acts 21:40. We're not going to get into what he spoke and what he said. We're going to, the preamble to it. Acts 21:14. I didn't know until 3 weeks ago what this beckoned meant necessarily. So here's what I thought if anybody would ever send, well, that person serves that person. They're employee for them. They're at their beck and call. I thought it was beck and call. It isn't. It's beck and call. I always thought it was beckon. It's beck and call. To beck somebody is different than call. A beck is like a either with your head or with your hand. So if you're like in a restaurant and you're like, that's to beck somebody. You'd be like, I'm ready for the check, or I need more ketchup, or Mountain Dew. Or you can beck somebody with your hand, like, come here. So Paul was beckoned with the hand, not with his head. He's like, I'm going to talk here. Or, okay, now calm down. I'm going to talk. Okay. And so he beckoned with the hand unto the people. That's the first point I wanted to make. Let's see. Beck is to notify. Okay. It's us. And he spake in the Hebrew tongue. I believe Paul spoke mostly Aramaic. Okay, I don't believe Paul was a Greek speaker. This kind of story kind of tells me he wasn't a Greek first speaker. And then when this kind of a story says, and he said to them in the Hebrew tongue, means to me, before this he wasn't speaking Hebrew either. Just in 2 small short verses, it says, the garrison guy's like, hey, can I speak to you? And the garrison and the chief says, well, I don't know. Can you speak Greek? And then here he says, I'm going to speak to them in the. So what was his common? It had to have been Aramaic, okay, which I believe was the strict and only language that the New Testament was recorded in. Aramaic. Period. End of stop. All of Paul's books, I'll say for sure. I believe also Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts. Getting into Hebrews, getting into 1st, 2nd, whatever Hebrews and Peter's and the Hebrews books themselves. Those may have been in Hebrew, but Aramaic is what Paul spoke. We have proof of that in just those couple verses.
So you said that they may be in Hebrew. So is Hebrew different than Aramaic?
It is, and it doesn't seem like it. So I'll tell you why, and someone else can come up with the verses here. So when Peter was denying Christ, and the cock crowed, he would deny him 3 times before the cock crowed. One of those times when he denied Christ, he was asked a question, and one of the ladies there said, "Hey, I recognize you because of your tongue."
Yeah.
That was because I believe the guys, I don't even have a map up here, but let me see if I can get to a map of where this might have, here. So we have the true Jewish language spoken down here. Then we had Samaria at that time, which was squished in the middle. And then we had the northern of Israel, which was up there by the Sea of Galilee, the Galilean. Okay, so there was it's like, and I say this and people think I'm racist, and I'm not, whatever. They can say whatever they want to. But when I talk about when people are speaking Mexican, I mean that they're speaking Mexican. And people correct me and say, no, that's Spanish.
It's a dialect, though.
Right.
So
And I'm like, you go.
have dialect.
Yeah. I'm like, you go tell people in Spain that the people in Mexico are speaking Spanish, and they'll say, no, they're not.
Yeah.
This is Spanish.
Ask Sonia how many dialects of Arabic there are.
We might be paused on that. Okay, anyway, that's okay. But that Spanish is different than that Mexican. And actually, I'm doing them both a favor by, what's the word? Separating the two of them. Giving them both an identity. I mean, Peru doesn't speak the same language as either one of them.
Oh, absolutely not.
So Spanish, you can't say, right? Yeah, we got a Peru person, traveler, right? I think so. I can't remember if you traveled down there, but...
I have a
Coworker down there. Yeah. So to say that that's the same. So this dialect is what's called Galilean Aramaic. It is a dialect of the Jewish language. But just like writing Spanish and writing what I'm going to call Mexican, respectfully, is different. Those words even look different. They end in different letters, start with whatever. And so this Galilean Aramaic, I believe, wholeheartedly was what Jesus spoke. we know that every single solitary follower of Jesus in the Acts church at the beginning, in Acts 2, are they not all Galilean? The 12 disciples, when Judas hanged himself, put a rock around his head, cast himself down the mountain. That's how he hanged himself. We'll do that video too. We've already done that study, but we need to do the video. When he did that and they had to replace him, they could only choose from Galileans. None of the 12 disciples were from Judea. Okay? So yeah, so that's why I believe that Paul also, through his interactions. Now, they could probably all speak Hebrew. We certainly know that Paul also could speak Greek. Probably likely that Barnabas could too. Not that we are off on Barnabas or Joseph, as he was called before the Holy Ghost came into him. But anyway, yeah. Let's see. We are to, spoke unto them the Hebrew tongue. So Paul is about to speak to them in now his third tongue. He'll be speaking in tongues. The speaking in tongues means a different language. It has nothing to do with, whatever, making up a tongue. Is speaking to them in the Hebrew tongue. Okay? Little review of Acts 21:33 through 40. Does this sound like the gospel of God? we had the vow. We have Jews in Asia. We have Jews in Israel. We have the people, the laws, the people, this holy place, this temple. Boy, it sure sounds like we're talking about Jews and Gentiles and the gospel of Christ. So, any questions? No? Thank you all.